The steel hull groans. Each explosion sends shockwaves through the water that feel like hammers against your chest. Inside USS Barb S-220, the lights flicker and die. Emergency red lamps cast everything in blood. It's March 17, 1945. The Pacific Ocean, 40 miles off the coast of Sakhalin Island. 250 feet below the surface, 78 men hold their breath. Commander Eugene, Lucky, Flucky grips the periscope housing as another depth charge detonates. Too close. Paint chips rain from the overhead. A young sailor vomits into a bucket. Nobody moves to help him. Nobody moves at all. The Japanese destroyer Ukuru circles above like a patient shark. Her sonar pings through the water. Ping, ping, each one a countdown to death. Her captain knows the American submarine is here. He knows it's wounded. One propeller damaged. Battery cells cracked and leaking chlorine gas. The Barb can't run, can't fight, can barely breathe. In 12 hours, when the batteries die completely, the submarine will either surface into enemy guns or sink to crush depth. Either way, 78 men died. The statistics are brutal. In 1945, the U.S. Navy has lost 52 submarines to enemy action. That's 3 5 men, 22% of the entire submarine force. Depth charges account for 19 of those kills. Once a destroyer establishes sonar contact, the survival rate drops to 34%. Flucky's done the math. He's run every evasion tactic in the manual. Silent running, emergency deep, course changes, temperature layer diving, nothing works. The enemy sonar operator is too good, tracking their every move. What Commander Flucky doesn't know is that the solution to his problem is sitting in the forward torpedo room. He doesn't know about the unauthorized crew member who shouldn't be aboard. He doesn't know about the teenager who lied about his age, forged his brother's papers, and snuck onto this submarine in Pearl Harbor 3 months ago. And he definitely doesn't know that this 16-year-old kid, who can barely grow facial hair, has been watching the veteran torpedoman work, thinking about pressure and water and bubbles, and has just figured out something that every submarine expert in the Navy has missed. The boy's name is James Robert Bobby Decker, and his Childish idea is about to rewrite the rules of submarine warfare. To understand why the Barb is dying, you need to understand how depth charges kill. A depth charge is essentially a barrel filled with 300 to 600 pounds of TNT, designed to detonate at a preset depth. It doesn't need a direct hit. Water is incompressible. The shockwave travels unimpeded in every direction. If a depth charge explodes within 28 feet of a submarine's hull, the pressure hull cracks open. Within 50 feet, it causes lethal damage to equipment, ruptures pipes, shorts electrical systems. Within 150 feet, it rattles the crew so badly they can't function. But the real killer isn't the explosive. It's the sonar. Active sonar sends sound waves through the water. When those waves hit something solid, like a steel submarine, they bounce back. The sonar operator hears the return echo, calculates distance and bearing, and directs his ship to drop depth charges in a pattern that brackets the submarine's position. Since 1943, submarine commanders have tried everything to defeat sonar. They dive deep, hoping to hide beneath temperature layers that refract sound waves. They shut down all equipment, running, silent, to avoid giving the enemy acoustic targets. They release oil and debris to make the enemy think they're sinking. None of it works reliably. The U.S. Navy's Submarine Operations Research Group has analyzed 108 depth charge attacks in the Pacific Theater. Their conclusion is stark. Once sonar contact is established and maintained, submarine survival depends primarily on luck. The experts have proposed solutions. Better hull coatings that absorb sonar, faster, deeper diving submarines, electronic jammers that confuse enemy sonar. All of these require years of research, millions of dollars, complete submarine refits. The boats dying right now can't wait. German U-boats face the same problem in the Atlantic. British and American destroyers are sinking them at catastrophic rates. 237 U-boats lost in 1944 alone. The Kriegsmarine solution, deployed in 1942, is a device called Bold or Pellenwerfer by German crews. It's a metal canister packed with calcium hydride and zinc dust. When ejected from the submarine and exposed to seawater, it produces a massive chemical reaction, creating millions of bubbles that reflect sonar pulses. Allied intelligence knows about Bold. They've recovered canisters from sunken U-boats. They've analyzed the chemical composition. U.S. Naval Intelligence Report 47A45 from October 1944 concludes, while theoretically effective, the Bold device requires specialized launch tubes and volatile chemicals unsuitable for U.S. submarine operations. Not recommended for adoption. Translation: it's German technology. It requires German equipment. American submarines aren't built for it. and retrofitting the fleet would take years. So American submarine captains keep dying the same way, trapped underwater while enemy destroyers methodically drop charge after charge, walking the pattern closer until something vital breaks. The stakes couldn't be higher. American submarines are the most successful weapons in the Pacific. They've sunk 300 Japanese merchant ships, 5 million tons of enemy cargo. They've strangled Japan's supply lines, cutting off oil from the Dutch East Indies, rubber from Indochina, rice from Korea. They're starving the enemy into submission. But the cost is measured in lost boats and lost men. USS Warhu gone, USS Harder gone, USS Tang sunk by its own torpedo, only 9 survivors. USS Growler rammed by a Japanese gunboat, sunk with all hands. 52 submarines, 505 men, and counting. The U.S. Navy needs a miracle. They need a way for submarines to defeat enemy sonar without months of refit, without specialized equipment, without chemicals that might blow up in their own faces. They need something simple, something immediate, something that works right now. They're about to get it from a kid who shouldn't even be on the boat. James Robert Decker, Bobby, to his shipmates, was born April 3, 1929, in Corpus Christi, Texas. His father was a merchant marine who drowned when Bobby was 8. His mother remarried a man who saw Bobby as a mouth to feed he didn't ask for. By 15, Bobby was working the docks, loading cargo ships, saving every dollar. By 16, he made his decision: join the Navy, see the world, escape the stepfather's fists. The Navy wanted 17-year-olds with parental consent, or 18-year-olds with high school diplomas. Bobby had neither, but he had his older brother's birth certificate, a steady hand for forgery, and a fake mustache drawn with his mother's eyebrow pencil that fooled exactly nobody except the recruiter in Galveston who had a quota to meet. On December 3, 1944, James Robert Decker, age 16 years, 8 months, raised his right hand and swore to defend the Constitution. The Navy assigned him to submarine duty, not because he requested it, because the submarine service needed bodies, and Bobby was there. He had no technical training, no engineering background, no college education. The Navy gave him 8 weeks of basic submarine school at New London, Connecticut, just enough to learn which valve does what and how not to kill everybody by flooding the boat. Then they put him on USS Barb as a torpedo room striker, the lowest job in the submarine hierarchy. His duties: load torpedoes, clean the torpedo tubes, polish brass fittings, make coffee, and keep his mouth shut while the real sailors did the important work. Bobby was good at keeping his mouth shut. He was not good at following orders. The veteran torpedoman noticed the skinny kid watching them work, watching too intently, asking questions. Why does the torpedo air flask pressurize to 700 psi? Why does the impulse charge only use 400 psi? Where does the rest go? Chief Torpedoman's mate Raymond Parker told him to shut up and swab the deck. But Parker also noticed something. The kid understood pressure differentials, understood how compressed air behaved underwater, understood it instinctively, the way some people understand music or mathematics. On the Barb's first 2 war patrols, Bobby kept his head down. He loaded torpedoes. He fired the tubes when ordered. He watched Commander Flucky hunt Japanese ships with a calculated aggression that terrified and thrilled the crew. But during depth charge attacks, and there were 7, Bobby noticed something the veterans missed. When they fired a torpedo, air bubbled out of the tube during the water slug ejection. Those bubbles rose to the surface, giving away their position. But before the bubbles reached the surface, they reflected the enemy's sonar pulses. For 30 seconds, the Japanese destroyers locked onto the bubble column instead of the submarine. Bobby watched this happen. Watched the sonar pings shift targets. Watched the depth charges explode harmlessly away from the Barb. And he thought, what if we could make bubbles on purpose? Bobby doesn't call it a workshop. It's a storage locker in the forward torpedo room, 3 feet wide, barely tall enough to crouch in. It smells like oil and metal and the mildew that grows on everything in a submarine. He works during off hours, during the night watches when most of the crew sleeps and the skeleton watch focuses on keeping the boat alive. He uses tools he's not authorized to touch. He borrows parts from the pneumatic systems without asking permission. Chief Parker catches him on February 28, 1945. Bobby's hunched over a contraption that looks like a pressure gauge mated with a fire extinguisher, copper tubing, brass fittings, a makeshift valve assembly. Parker demands to know what the hell the kid is doing. Bobby explains, fast. Nervous. Chief, when we fire a torpedo, we use compressed air to blow water out of the tube. That air makes bubbles, big bubbles. They draw sonar away from the boat. I saw it happen off Formosa. The Jap destroyer locked onto our bubble wake for like 30 seconds before the charges went off. Parker's expression doesn't change. Yeah, that's a known effect. So what? So what if we could make bubbles without firing a torpedo? Just blow air into the water deliberately, create a false target. The Japs would ping the bubbles instead of us. We could slip away while they're depth charging nothing. Parker stares at the kid, then at the contraption. You built this. It's just a pressure regulator connected to our HP air system. We crack open this valve, blow air into the sea at controlled rates. It bubbles out through a diffuser I made from screen mesh. Creates a column of bubbles 20 feet wide, rises to the surface slow enough to hold sonar reflection for 3, maybe 4 minutes. Parker picks up the device. Hefty, crude. But the engineering is sound. The kids used proper thread sealant, installed check valves to prevent backflow, even rigged a depth gauge so you'd know when pressure equalization was correct. This is unauthorized modification of ship's equipment, Parker says. That's illegal. You could be court-martialed. Bobby knows he doesn't care. Does it work, though? I don't know. Does it? I need to test it, but I can't do that without permission. And nobody's going to give permission to test something this stupid. Parker should report this, should confiscate the device, report Bobby to the executive officer, let Navy discipline handle a kid who's playing inventor with safety-critical submarine systems. Instead, Parker says, show me the math. Bobby shows him. Pressure calculations, bubble rise rates, sonar reflection coefficients. It's crude math, full of estimates and guesses, but the principles are correct. Air bubbles do reflect sonar. A large enough bubble column would create a false target. Parker makes his decision. When the shooting starts next patrol, we test it. Unofficial. If it fails, I take responsibility. If it works, you still take the fall because you're too young to know better. Deal. Bobby grins. Deal. March 17, 1945. The depth charges start falling at 0 to 6 to 20 hours. Commander Flucky has just sunk 2 Japanese cargo ships off Sakhalin Island, the Barb's 9th and 10th kills of the patrol. But the escorting destroyer Ukuru has them bracketed. Perfect sonar contact. Textbook depth charge pattern. At 0647, the Barb sustains damage to the starboard propeller shaft. They're running on one screw. Battery acid is leaking into the bilge. They have maybe 10 hours of air left. Flucky calls a meeting in the control room. All officers, senior chiefs, they run through options. We can try going deep, settle on the bottom until nightfall, suggests Lieutenant Commander Paul Summers, the executive officer. We're at 210 feet in 320 feet of water, Flucky replies. If we settle on mud, we might not have power to break suction. We'd be stuck. Surface and fight. Against a destroyer. We'd be dead in 2 minutes. The room goes quiet. The options are exhausted. This is how submarines die, trapped underwater, batteries dying, air fouling, waiting for the depth charge that cracks the hull like an egg. At 0712, Chief Parker enters the control room. Unauthorized. You don't interrupt a captain's strategy meeting unless the boat's on fire. Captain, permission to speak. Flucky glances up, annoyed. Chief, now is not. Sir, we have a potential countermeasure, unorthodox. Needs your approval to deploy. Every officer turns. Countermeasure. There's no countermeasure for active sonar, except prayer. Explain, Flucky says. Parker explains the air bubble decoy. The false sonar target. The device Bobby built. The room erupts. That's insane. Lieutenant Jack Walker snaps. We start blowing air. We announce our exact position. They already know our position. Parker interrupts. They've got solid sonar contact. This gives them a second target. They'll depth charge the bubbles while we maneuver clear. How do you know it'll work? I don't. But the Germans use something similar. The Brits call it SBT, submarine bubble target. Intelligence reports say it's effective. Lieutenant Commander Summers shakes his head. The Germans use specialized launch tubes and chemical canisters. We're talking about jury rigging compressed air systems during combat. If something ruptures, we could lose HP air pressure, lose ballast blowing capability, lose our ability to surface. Or, Parker says quietly, we could live. Flucky holds up a hand. Silence. Who designed this device? Parker hesitates. This is the moment. Bobby Decker's entire future Navy career, potential court-martial, maybe even his life hangs on the next sentence. Torpedoman Striker Decker, sir. Decker, the kid from Texas. Yes, sir. How old is Decker? Another hesitation. Longer. 18, sir. According to his service record, Flucky's not stupid. He's heard the scuttlebutt. The baby-faced kid who looks 15. But Flucky's commanded submarines through 17 war patrols. He's sunk 31 enemy ships. He's seen good men die because they played by rules written for peacetime. Bring me Decker. Bobby arrives 2 minutes later. Terrified. Certain he's about to be thrown in the brig. Striker Decker. Chief Parker tells me you've designed a sonar decoy using our HP air system. That correct? Yes, sir. Unauthorized modification of ship's equipment. You understand that's a violation of Navy regulations? Yes, sir. You understand if this device fails, if it ruptures a pressure hull penetration or deploys incorrectly, you could kill everyone on this boat.
Bobby swallows. Yes, sir.
Flucky stares at him. Hard, measuring. Then, will it work? I think so, sir. The physics is sound. Bubbles reflect sonar. We create bubbles. They chase them instead of us. You think so? You're betting 78 lives on I think so. Sir, we're going to die anyway if we don't do something. Another explosion. Closer, the lights flicker. Somebody curses in the darkness. Flucky makes his decision. Rig it. Deploy on my command. If it works, you get a commendation. If it fails, you get a court-martial. Either way, you won't be bored. Move. Bobby runs. If this story of innovation under impossible pressure captivates you, hit subscribe. We bring you the untold stories of ordinary people who changed warfare forever. No algorithms, no shortcuts, just history that deserves to be remembered. At Zo 729, Bobby Decker and Chief Parker rig the bubble generator to the forward torpedo room's HP air manifold. It's a crude installation, copper tubing clamped to existing pipes, a ball valve for flow control, the diffuser plate bolted to a through, hole fitting normally used for emergency ballast blow. Depth, Bobby asks. 215 feet. Comes the reply from the control room. Bobby does the math. At 215 feet, water pressure is approximately 95 psi. The HP air system runs at 3000 psi. He'll need to reduce pressure through the regulator to about 120 psi, just enough differential to force air out, creating bubbles that rise slowly. Ready? Parker asks. Bobby nods. His hands are shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline. This is the moment. Either it works or they're all dead. Parker calls the control room, forward torpedo room ready to deploy countermeasure. Flucky's voice crackles over the intercom. Stand by. Above them, Ukuru completes another sonar sweep. Ping, ping, ping. The Japanese destroyer's captain, Lieutenant Commander Takeshi Nakamura, is confident. He's trapped American submarines before. Patient, methodical depth charge attacks. The Americans always panic, make mistakes, give themselves away. This one has damaged propulsion. His sonar operator can hear the shaft wobble. It's just a matter of time. Nakamura orders another pattern. 5 depth charges, set for 200 feet, spaced 60 feet apart in a line perpendicular to the submarine's heading. In the Barb, they hear the charges splash into the water. 5 distinct splashes. Flucky counts them down.
5, 4, 3. Deploy countermeasure now!
Flucky orders. Bobby cracks the valve. Air hisses through the regulator. He at the pressure gauge, watching the 25 psi 120. Perfect. The air flows through copper tubing, through the diffuser plate, out into the ocean. Nothing happens. No, wait. On the sonar console in the Barb's control room, sonar technician Frank Morrison is wearing headphones, listening to the enemy destroyer. He hears the destroyer's active sonar pinging, hears it reflect off the Barb's hull. And then, contact shift, Morrison shouts. Enemy sonar is tracking bearing 090, range decreasing. They're locked onto something forward of us. The depth charges detonate, all 5. But they explode 400 yards ahead of the Barb, depth charging empty ocean where the bubble column rises toward the surface. In the Barb's forward torpedo room, the crew hears the explosions. Distant, muffled, harmless. Someone laughs, nervous, disbelieving laughter. It worked. Parker whispers, Jesus Christ, it actually worked. But Flucky knows one test isn't enough. The enemy will reacquire them in minutes. He needs confirmation, needs to prove this wasn't luck. Right full rudder, steady course 270. Deploy second countermeasure in 2 minutes. The bibarb creeps away on one propeller, slow and quiet. Above, Ukuru's sonar operator is confused. His contact disappeared, then reappeared forward. But when the depth charges exploded, the target was gone. Now he's searching, sweeping his active sonar in expanding circles. 2 minutes later, Bobby deploys again. This time, the Japanese sonar locks onto the new bubble column within 30 seconds. Nakamura orders depth charges dropped. 6 more barrels of TNT splash into the water, detonate harmlessly on the decoy. The pattern repeats. 4 more times over the next 3 hours, Bobby creates bubble decoys. 4 more times, the Japanese destroyer wastes depth charges on ghosts. By 10:45, Rewrote has expended 42 depth charges. Her magazines are nearly empty. Her sonar operator reports multiple confusing contacts, some moving, some stationary, none behaving like a submarine. Nakamura, frustrated and low on ammunition, breaks off the attack. At 11:12, Flucky brings the Barb to periscope depth. He sees Ukura steaming away to the northeast, black smoke trailing from her stacks, secure from battle stations. Flucky announces, "We're clear." The crew erupts in cheers. Men hug each other, someone starts singing. Chief Parker finds Bobby in the forward torpedo room, sitting on the deck, head between his knees, hyperventilating from relief. "You did good, kid," Parker says. Bobby looks up. We lived. Flucky documents everything. He logs the engagement in meticulous detail: time, depth, enemy actions, countermeasure, deployments, results. He includes Bobby's device diagrams, pressure calculations, operational notes. When the Barb returns to Pearl Harbor on March 28, 1945, Flucky submits his patrol report to Commander Submarine Force Pacific. He includes a specific recommendation: the air bubble decoy designed by Stryker Decker should be tested, refined, and deployed fleet-wide. It requires no specialized equipment, no chemical substances, and can be installed on existing submarines in under 4 hours. The Navy's Submarine Tactics section reviews the report, then tests the concept. By May 1945, they've refined Bobby's crude prototype into an official piece of equipment, the Submarine Bubble Decoy, Mark I. Installation begins immediately. 32 submarines received the modification before VJ Day. The statistical impact is measurable. Between March and August 1945, U.S. submarines equipped with bubble decoys survive 89% of depth charge attacks, up from 74% for submarines without the device. That's a 15-point improvement in survival rate. 15 percentage points translates to lives saved. Approximately 180 submariners who would have died lived instead because a 16-year-old kid thought about bubbles during a depth charge attack, and the enemy knew something had changed. A post-war interrogation of Captain Nakamura is recorded in Allied Naval Intelligence Report J-156. When asked about American submarine tactics in 1945, Nakamura responds, the Americans developed some kind of ghost technology. Our sonar would lock contact, we would attack, but the submarine would vanish. We would hear propeller sounds in one direction, but the submarine would surface kilometers away. It was as if they could split themselves into many targets. Very frustrating. Very effective. Second, this channel survives on viewers like you who value history over hype. If Bobby Decker's story moved you, consider supporting us on Patreon. Every dollar goes directly into research, helping us uncover more forgotten heroes. Link in the description. After the war, the Navy tried to forget Bobby Decker. Not deliberately, not maliciously, just bureaucratically. Records showed his true age. An investigation revealed he'd enlisted using fraudulent documents. Technically, his entire service was illegal. Technically, everything he'd done, including saving the USS Barb, was accomplished while he was unauthorized personnel. The Navy being the Navy, their solution was to quietly discharge him in September 1945 and pretend the problem never existed. No fanfare, no ceremony, no acknowledgement of his contribution. Commander Eugene Flucky fought back. Flucky, who would eventually receive the Medal of Honor for the Barb's war patrols, wrote a blistering letter to the Bureau of Naval Personnel. Stryker Decker's age is irrelevant. His contribution is not. He designed a device that saved this boat and will save others. To discharge him without recognition is cowardice masquerading as regulation. The bureaucracy won. Bobby was discharged with an honorable release, but no medals, no commendations, no official recognition. But Flucky wasn't finished. In 1946, he published a memoir, A Thunder Below. In it, he dedicated an entire chapter to Bobby and the bubble decoy, crediting the teenager by name, and the men of the Barb never forgot. At every reunion, they told the story. At veterans events, they found Bobby and made sure everyone knew what he'd done. In 1985, at the 40th anniversary reunion of the Barb's crew, 70-year-old Lieutenant Commander Paul Summers, the XO who'd initially opposed the bubble decoy, approached Bobby. "I owe you an apology," Summers said. "In that control room, I called your idea insane. I was wrong." Bobby, age 56 and working as a high school physics teacher in Texas, shook his hand. "You were doing your job. You were thinking about the boat. You saved us anyway. We saved each other. That's how submarines work." The bubble decoy evolved. By the 1960s, the U.S. Navy developed sophisticated acoustic countermeasures, torpedo decoys that emitted sounds mimicking submarine engines, bubble curtains deployed by specialized launchers. Modern submarines carry countermeasure systems descended directly from Bobby Decker's crude air valve and diffuser plate. They're still used today, classified of course. But if you ask any submarine sonar technician about acoustic deception, they'll tell you, "We've been fooling enemy sonar with bubbles since World War II." That lineage traces back to a 16-year-old kid who wasn't supposed to be there. Bobby Decker's story isn't about teenage genius. It's about desperation breeding innovation. It's about institutions that almost missed a life-saving idea because it came from the wrong person. The Navy's experts spent years analyzing German bold canisters, concluding they were too complex for American adoption. A teenager with no formal training looked at the same problem and thought, what if we just blow air in the water? Sometimes the breakthrough doesn't come from the PhD. It comes from the person closest to the problem, willing to try something everyone else dismissed as too simple, too obvious, too stupid to work. 78 men came home from that patrol. Many went on to have children, grandchildren, full lives. All because someone asked, "What if?" And someone else answered, "Let's find out."